I'm hanging out with my boy Luke here. I've had him the absolute longest that I've ever owned any horse in my life. So I thought it would be appropriate to talk about this set of 14 items with him, as I feel like I've learned the most from him in my life. Now, it doesn't mean that plenty of other horses have taught me plenty of other things, but these 14, what I would call almost common core concepts of horse training, are appropriately delivered with him present. So let's get started with number one. And the first item is kind of a no-brainer, and it is don't use pain to train horses. And I believe this is true. Now, I know a lot of people will say things like, I really love my horse and I would never use pain, while they carry a crop and have spurs on. Both of those items are, in my opinion, weapons. They are something that somebody uses on a horse because their methods of training only become effective if they have the ability to threaten and or apply more pain than what they can apply just with their body. So they carry something to do more damage with. Using pain with horses usually creates quite a bit of animosity and fear in the horses themselves, and makes for a much more poor training and ineffective experience for everybody. I don't believe anybody feels good dishing out pain, and nobody feels good getting pain. Number two is be the leader and help them feel safe, keep them safe kind of idea. And being a leader is a very subjective term. The idea that we should lead the way or we should be the main presence kind of idea. For some people, it means to be the boss, to be always telling everybody what to do. But sometimes being the leader means you got to be the example. So say, for example, you wanted to have a horse go into a river or a stream or a puddle, and you don't go in it, but you want them to go in it. So you try to make them go in it, but they won't go in it because you won't go in it. Sometimes you got to be the person that goes in and says, look, come where I'm going, and everything will be totally cool. So being a leader doesn't just mean that you get to tell everybody what to do and stuff like that. It also means that you are going to be doing things that you probably might not want to do. Hard to say. You've also got to be able to be sort of a protector. A leader is somebody who stands up for the whole of the group and says, I'm number one. Number one means that I manage the external environment, the external effects, anybody that's going to come in and cause trouble, and the horse that might come in to cause trouble. You're the guy or the girl to deal with the problem because you're the leader. So leader is a very subjective term, but if you take it as in you're going to be the one that shows that you can handle things, you can manage things, and if you can't, you're going to figure out how, and you will be consistent and reliable. That's a pretty good leader. I agree with that one. Number three, very, very common thing is a lot of people say that you must move horses' feet. They shouldn't move yours. And I think I've covered this before. I don't really agree with this a lot. I think that there is an unfinished sentence that comes after this, is where, yes, absolutely, you want to be able to move your horse if you need to. If I say, hey, Luke, back up, he should move. If he comes into my space, I should not be trying to get out of the way. But the unfinished part of that is that we want to be able to go with them. We want, when we say to them, out of the way, or let's go that way or something like that, or go that way, we also want to be able to be going with them. The ideal situation is not that we're always moving their feet. The ideal situation is that we are going together. But there is one pretty good rule that does come out of that. We really do not want our horses moving us out of the way if they come in. But that goes back to point two, where you just have to be a good leader. Otherwise, they're trying to be a good leader. So, number four is make your idea their idea. I'm not a big fan of this one overall. I find it to be confusing to try to explain and incredibly difficult to discern whether or not you have made your idea their idea. It goes to my previous point of that when we move them, we want to be able to go together. So a lot of the times you might actually go with them too. So it's definitely not a hard and fast rule that the things that you want to do, you have to somehow convince them that it's a great idea for them to do as well. So making your idea their idea is hard to conceptualize, it's hard to quantify, because it really is just how you might see it. It might not be how an external person. So say, for example, you want a horse to go through a dangerous spot in the bushes or something. You're going down a trail and it's dangerous. So you do everything you can to make them go that way. And it's your idea to go, and then they finally go, but you've really done it out of coercion and fear patterns and behaviors and methods. So your idea, their idea is difficult. So I'm not a big fan of this one, for the point of that it is very hard to discern whether or not that is actually happening, or if they're just like, well, I give up, I guess I'll just do whatever you keep on telling me to do. And then sure, yeah, it's their idea. So I don't use this one much myself. Okay, number 5 is about them keeping both eyes on you. In the case of Luke right here, we can see that I have both eyes and both ears most of the time. He is very interested in me. I've come to hang out with him, give him some scritchy scratches. We're good buddies. Every time we hang around, it's good news for him. So I'm going to get the majority of his attention. If we're doing training, we do want our horses to be paying attention to us. I think this is a no-brainer and applies to just about anything and everything that you want to hang around with and pay attention to you. If you're hanging around with a person, it's handy to have both their eyes and, that kind of thing. So yes, I agree with this one. And in the case that you are working with a horse and they're not giving you their attention, yeah, you're probably just not much of an influence, and you have to figure out how to be a bigger influence through being a good draw. Number 6 is always let them know how good they are. Actually, I 100,000% totally agree with this idea. I think it's very important to always be praising your horse, every tiny little thing they do. And it's going to sound weird, but even when they do something bad and you say no, and you ask them to back off or do something, if they respond to that no, you praise them. You say thank you, because the moment that you're in then is what needs to be praised. Even if, say for example, he were to bite me or something, say I put my hand out and he gave me a nibble or something, and I was like, no, don't do that. If he stopped doing the biting, I would praise him. But mostly praising another being, horse, dog, cat, human, feels good. It's a really good thing to practice. It's the kind of thing that you want to do often, as much as you can. It'll make you a better person. Whether it makes your horse better, probably does, because you're better. You're going to be kinder, nicer. You're going to be looking. You're always going to be looking for the opportunity to be appreciative and generous with your words. And that, to me, is the definition of a really good human. Number 7 is to avoid firm pats. When people come along and they hit their horse really hard because they're super happy with something that they did, and they'll go smack, smack, smack. They'll be like this. And you see him try to leave because he's not a big fan of it. I almost never do it, but they would really be smacking. And I agree with this. I think that it causes horses pain, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. If you work with anything that is not 110% domesticated, that has been putting up with that forever, any other horse will leave. They don't like it. They don't want it. It doesn't work. They flinch. It's uncomfortable. Humans don't like it either. So I don't know why we do it with horses. Number 8 is to teach a horse to lower their head for relaxation. There are cases when a horse is really worried, and you'll be thinking to yourself, how can I get this horse to calm down? You might try scratching, you might try petting. And a lot of the times when you're working with them, it can help just to have their head lower. Now, there's a biological reason for that. They've been shown to have a lower heart rate when their head is lower. We also have to think of the way their eyes work. The horse's eyes, they're kind of like bifocals in a way, where their head, to be able to see further or closer, they have to raise their head or bring it down. So if they're offering their head to come down, they're probably going to be pretty relaxed. Hey, man. Okay, number 9's a little bit long, so I'm just going to read it out. Make sure your space is sacred When leading on a longer lead rope, make sure they stop at the same time you stop, or back them up and try again. This is an interesting one. This is an interesting idea. I do believe that our space should be very important. We should have what's called a safety circle. Safety circle is something that you've determined, you have figured out, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 6, 10 feet in diameter, to keep you safe. Some horses are very dangerous. I won't let them in anywhere 20 feet. Like 20 feet they come in, you're out. Don't come anywhere near me. 20 feet is too close. You're too fast. You're too unpredictable. I can't figure out what you're doing or why you're doing it. So I need a little bit more time, and I will have a horse leave me 20 feet. Like this guy, very nosy. Back up. Stay out of my space a little more. For example, I'll ask him to leave. But he's very touchy-feely. He's a very fun kind of horse. So I kind of like it in a way. It's kind of fun. So I'll shrink my safety circle and in he will come. If in the cases where you are feeling worry or concern or fear, absolutely your space is sacred. You must ask a horse to leave it. I'm not sure of the idea of anything specific other than get them out of that circle. Determine that circle, keep them out of that circle, defend it like it is the most important thing ever to you. And I think that's a good rule to follow. As for leading and you're walking around and they're not stopping at the same time as you, I do think it's very important that we have leading really, really good. You want to have it perfect and then break the rules afterwards. So yes, if you're walking along and your horse isn't matching steps with you, then you probably have a problem. Yeah, that's a pretty important one. But over time, it'll just be what they do, especially if you practice that. They'll want to do it. The ones that don't want to do it, they either want to be snugly close to you or they're trying to cut you off. So that's why we want to pay an awful lot of attention whether or not a horse is actually matching your steps. So that also means stopping and going. Okay, I'm going to have to read number 10 out. It's a little bit long. Once their shoulders and hindquarters move nicely away as you drive them around you, move that exercise to have them go forward between you and a wall or fence and keep closing the gap to test progress. I'm not entirely sure of the purpose of this particular exercise. I've done it. One of the things that I can determine is whether or not a horse is comfortable going through squeezy situations. And in this case, it means me and a fence. If they're scared of the fence, then that horse is probably going to come into me. If they're scared of me, they're going to go into the fence. If they're scared of both, you're going to have a horse that won't go through. Now, scared is kind of a funny word because it doesn't mean that they're actually really scared, but there might be some fear of sort of being pinched in. I think we break this up into two things. One, you're doing some groundwork with the horse going around with you. They should already have their hindquarters kind of going away because their nose is in. If you don't have that, don't do anything, because the nose coming in means that they're constantly drawing in towards you, hoping to stop doing these mindless circles around you. And if their nose is going away, that means they really just don't want to be around you, and so they're trying to leave. If you were then going to extend that exercise next to an object like a trailer, most commonly horses hate trailers, so if you try to do that near a trailer, they will knock you over or they will not go through or something like that. They'll just want to snug up right next to you and stay away from the trailer. A fence is another thing that they might just feel squeezing. So it's actually two different things to be thinking about here. If you can get a horse to go through calmly, it means you've built enough trust where they think, yeah, I can go through. You're not going to whack me on the way or something like that, or it's not going to be an overly scary thing to do. So it's no big deal. They're not really going to have a chance. If they're thinking to have their hindquarter, if you have done everything way before getting to the fence and they keep their nose in and you've got lots of draw, you're probably not going to have any trouble getting through a fence. So it just really won't be an issue. Got him. Another skeeter dead. Okay, number 11. This is a really common one. It says to take lots of breaks often to have the horse absorb what they've learned. I'm not a big fan of the idea that horses need time to absorb something. I don't think horses really think much on, kind of what's happened, and they're like, oh yeah, and then we did this, and then I got like that, and this is how I got release. And I don't think horses think that. I think that horses are much more about patterns. Now, if you've got a horse that is kind of losing its mind and they're getting really worried and stuff like that, then you're going to want to take a break, mainly because you're freaking them out. So if you can get something sorted out You don't necessarily have to go take a break. You can just take a small walk. They're just going to move forward. Horses don't dwell on something or sit on something and be like, oh, well, okay, well, we did this and then I went forward and I moved my foot this way, and they just don't. You do that over and over and over again with peace and quiet and stuff like that. Horses will just pick that up. They'll be happy to do it. They'll be more comfortable with you to do it. You'll have lots of draw. Everything will be much better. Taking breaks is good if you're either tired, you're tired, like they're tired, you're tired. It's a lot of work. There's some fear involved. Those kinds of things, you need to take a break and do a reset and stop and be like, whoa, hang on a second. How can I get this done quieter and more effectively? And I think that's how it works for me. Okay, number 12, I've heard this one. I don't agree with it at all, unless it's an emergency situation, and then maybe. But it is better to send a horse into a trailer rather than go into the trailer first and have them come in with you. Now, it really does depend on the trailer. Some trailers are tiny. You absolutely don't want to be inside a trailer with a horse. You better be able to send them in. Some horses' trailers are bigger. For example, my trailer is reasonably big. If I get in there, I've got enough space that another horse can come in and it won't really be an issue. The idea, though, the concept of how to move that horse around is an important one, because we're thinking about whether or not we should be pushing or driving them in or drawing them in. So I think if it's not an emergency situation and you have the time to work on it, you absolutely want to be able to have enough draw where wherever you go, they go, and you're being the leader by being in the trailer first, and they'll say to you, I'll go with you because I trust that you know where you're going and where to be. So they will come in with you. You also want to make sure that you have enough of a presence that if you kind of get big, or you kind of say, hey, back up, you're getting into my space, they will back up and get out of your space and leave the trailer if need be. So trailer training is a dangerous exercise in and of itself. I don't think that if it was an emergency situation, I would not start on driving a horse in ever. I would always want to be able to draw them in quietly and slowly and be that leader that you really want to be and say, hey, come in here, be with me. I know it's a little worrisome, but it's all good. So that's what we would work on. So anything outside of an emergency, I definitely wouldn't do this. Not to say that you couldn't work on it later. You could get it to where you could just tell a horse, hey, get in the trailer, and you're essentially driving them in and they'd go in. I think that's fun. But overall, you got to get in there with them anyways to go. If you tie them up and you're going to tie them up, you're going to close the gate, you got to be in there. So both ways are good. Okay, this is an interesting one. It's a little long. I'm going to read it so I don't paraphrase it. Unrequested forward motion demands immediate backing the horse up a few steps, which is important for horses that like to push through people. This goes back to the safety circle idea. If a horse is moving without you requesting it, it could be a dangerous situation. We don't want that. What we want is a horse listening and saying, okay, well, what would you like? If you have a horse that is stepping in and getting into your safety circle, then it goes back to just defending your space. If they still don't and they still kind of push, it really means that they consider themselves the best guardian of their space and they're trying to get you to go somewhere. So say, for example, they're kind of hungry. A lot of horses are really hungry and they want to get out to the pasture. They want to get to the bale of hay that's on the ground, and they'll just try to push right through you if you are in between. If you can't be a big enough presence, you can't be sort of strong enough or big enough or kind of loud enough possibly to say, hey, no, don't go through me. This is my safety circle. Get out. And that can be a very firm approach. It doesn't have to be outright scary and dangerous and painful and bringing up all kinds of sticks and stuff like that. But we can absolutely make enough noise and be enough action that a horse will immediately think, wow, I don't want to be anywhere near this. It doesn't mean we want to put fear in though. So we have to be very cautious. It's a very broad topic. It's hard to cover it all. But if horses are pushing into people, that person needs to sort out how they are going to have that horse leave their space, and usually involves being kind of big, kind of loud, and a bit of action for sure, so that that horse knows that you're really serious about it. So essentially what I'm saying is that if a horse is going to be pushing through a human, that human has not sorted out with that horse who is the leader, who is the one who's setting the boundaries, who is the one that is controlling the environment and making sure that everybody is cool and safe. That horse has not looked at that person and said, I trust you, I can relax. Okay, number 14 is one that I completely disagree with. And it is that when you want your horses to move, you don't want to make it personal by looking at their face or their eyes. You should look at their feet. Now, I have never used this method. I've heard about it. I think I tried it and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I've never ever seen a horse look at another horse's feet so that it isn't personal. I mean, I don't even think any of you can even imagine that. If you watch horse behaviors, you will never see one horse go to another horse and say, you need to move out of the way, you need to do something, and then stare at their feet. That is a human concept. I mean, I get it. When it comes to the predator and prey concept, if we're staring at them, it means that we're going to hunt them down and eat them. But horses can absolutely learn that just because we're staring at them doesn't mean that we're about to eat them or we're going to attack them or something. If you have a set of behaviors or a very consistent set of behaviors or actions that is in a very attacking form, then yeah, every time you look at them, they're going to think, oh God, that guy's going to attack me or that girl's going to attack me. But if your look is much more of a caring kind, like you're staring at them like, look, I really need you to move. It's very important to me. You're willing to be firm, but you're willing to be very, very generous with your words and your actions and everything inside of you. Horses pick that up. There is zero reason, in my opinion, and in my experience so far, I find it actually not only ineffective, but detrimental to stare at a horse's feet instead of their face. You will create a much stronger connection and a much more effective set of training methods if you're looking them in the eye and they're looking you in the eye. That is very common. We expect to have two eyes on us, then they can expect to have two eyes on them. And I think that is a fantastic way to work with horses, whether they are wild, feral, or these domesticated rescues that I've got all over the place around here. So hopefully that's been interesting. Hopefully that's been helpful. Great set of questions, Kathy. I really appreciate you sending these in. Hopefully it's not confusing at all. But if you have any questions or thoughts, please let me know anytime. So that's it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one.